October, Friday the 13th, 1989, Jimmy Wade Martin's body was found on a street in the small town of Bonne Terre, Missouri. When there are witnesses, a murder weapon, and a taped confession, how exactly does a murder become a cold case?
It started at that little bar.
This case is not ended by any stretch of the imagination.
A lot of people in that town's not going to talk.
Rumor has it was
big brawl, big bar fight.
County Jail.
We have been working so hard on this.
I can't be silent anymore. You know that
Guy that got killed here last night?
There was rumors going around like the next
We
day.
started doing a lot with Facebook.
The question is, what happened to Jimmy Wade Martin?
From Blueburn Productions, this is Small Town Forgotten. I'm your host, Chris Halsey.
There could be more interest soon in the investigation into the Friday, October 13th, 1989 beating death of Jimmy Wade Martin of Bonne Terre. Sources tell KFMO B104 News there could be new evidence in the case. KFMO B104 News has tried to contact some law enforcement officials and others for more information. We've been successful to a degree and been told that a meeting between the investigating entities, including representatives of the Bonne Terre Police Department, Missouri State Highway Patrol, St. Francis County Prosecutor's Office, and others, are some of Martin's family members, as well as local businessman Chris Halsey, are also set to be at the meeting. Halsey, who is a cousin of Martin's, helped produce a podcast called Small Town Forgotten that addresses Martin's murder. The podcast can be found at smalltownforgotten.com.
Hello, Small Town Forgotten listeners. Let me start off by apologizing for the delay in releasing this episode. We had some important developments in the case that needed our full focus. Our intention was to release one episode every other week on Tuesdays, except of course for the first episode, which was released on Friday the 13th, in memory of Jimmy Wade's death. But our second episode was going to begin a schedule that could be relied on. We sometimes forget that we're telling a story that is not yet ended, and as I've said before, this is a real-time podcast, and this is a story that we are not just narrators of, but also characters in. I've been reaching out to local law enforcement since we began this venture, and last week, a representative from the Missouri State Highway Patrol contacted our director, and a representative from the Bonne Terre Police Department contacted me.
Chief of Police Douglas Calvert, Bonne Terre Police Department. I have been a police officer since 1992. I started at the Bonne Terre Police Department in 1993. Promoted to corporal in 95, to sergeant in 97, to captain in 99, and then promoted to chief in 2005 upon the retirement of longtime Chief Frederick Nowell. Our overall goal, like I to reinstate, is justice, and to bring those parties, or party that is responsible for this, to justice, to the family. Obviously, there's no way we can, totally bridge that gap because of their loss. But in order to try to bring some closure to this case, the Bonne Terre Police Department will cooperate in any way.
And from those conversations, a meeting was set up. And even though there is a pandemic and traveling is a challenge right now, we felt that this meeting was important enough for the risk. So our producers and director flew into St. Louis, and the Small Town Forgotten team met with local law enforcement this past week. We were not allowed to bring cameras or audio recorders into the meeting, but it was an impressive room, with different law enforcement branches being represented. Now keep in mind, this case is 31 years old, so most of them were either in high school or just out of school at the time of the murder, but all of them are familiar with the story. We shared with them our theories and some new information collected from the twins, and they, in turn, explained to us a path we could take to move the investigation forward. I'd like to take a moment now to thank everyone that was in that room for the time they took in their busy schedules to hear our story, and for their willingness to help if they could. What was the result of that meeting? Well, all I can say right now is only time will tell, and I'll keep you updated. No matter what happens, we are grateful they met with us. Since the director was in town, we took the opportunity to retrace the steps of that night 31 years ago. The twins and the camera crew joined us as we walked from where the Coal Bin Tavern was on Division Street to where the site of Jimmy Wade's murder was on Mound Street. To our surprise, several residents of Bonne Terre, people we knew and some we didn't, came up to share old details of that night and the days after. Thank you to all the folks who stopped their cars to talk and some who came out of their homes to give their support and encouragement. I would like to say something to the people who have expressed remorse for not sharing their testimonies earlier, for not speaking out at the time out of fear. People who saw something but have stayed silent. Just know that it's not too late. Now is not too late. You're just in time to help, to speak up, and trust me, you won't be the only one with a story. This small town forgotten story is not small anymore. People are listening, and people are talking. When we were first recording this episode, we had over 5,800 downloads, and now we have increased those downloads by over 1,000. We have over 50,000 views on Facebook and over 3,000 followers on social media. Our listeners are from all over the world, from every state in the U.S., many of them from Illinois, California, and Texas, as far away as Hawaii and as remote as Alaska. And to my surprise, we have a large number of listeners in Canada, Australia, and the UK. And a special hello to our lone listener in South Africa. The response from our second episode has blown me away. I'm so floored and grateful to have reached so many people. I'm especially thankful to all of our listeners in our home state of Missouri. It's all of you who are going to make a difference in this case, and who already have made a difference in this case.
I remember when you used to sing Alabama all the time when you were Daddy's little babies. But you are Daddy's big girls now. Dad is so proud of his girls. I can't believe you are in 6th grade. It seems like yesterday I was just holding you in my arms.
Those are the thoughts of Jimmy Wade Martin, written in a letter that he gave to the twins just a month before he died. The twins read this letter to me when we recently sat down for an interview, and you could tell they've read it themselves countless times. He was proud of those little girls when they were 11. I could only imagine what he would think of them now. He is family to me, but I didn't know Jimmy Wade. I was too young to know him when he was alive, but I know the people who formed him into the person that he was. And when I talk to them, they tell me roughly the same thing about him, that he was happy-go-lucky, full of life, and that he also was a bit of a hellraiser. He didn't back down from anyone. We know that he drank, and that he had a temper when pushed. But every person I spoke with, told me how much he loved his family, and especially those twin girls. The first interview I want to share with you is with my grandma and my great-aunt Kathy. They were not blood-related to Jimmy, but these two women not only knew him well and for a long time, but also knew Jimmy Wade's wife, his sisters, and his parents. Before you listen to it, it would help to remind you of some of the family relationships. Jimmy Wade's parents were Jim and Niecy Martin. Jim was the oldest Martin of 6 kids. Mike was the youngest Martin, and he and Kathy were married. We lost Uncle Jim in 2000, and Uncle Mike passed away earlier this year. Sean, our director, also sat down with us. And remember, my grandma, Joyce Johnson, is Sean's mother, and she was married to Dan Martin, the 3rd or 4th sibling of the Martin family. He's a twin, so it's hard to know the birth order. That is to say, we are sitting down with Jimmy Wade's aunts, but aunts that were not so far away in age. In fact, my great-aunt Kathy was the same age as Jimmy Wade.
I knew Jimmy before I knew Uncle Mike. Me, Jimmy, Jeannie, and my sister Connie were all friends. Hung out at their house all the time. They came to our house. I remember Jimmy loved life. He was always happy.
Happy-go-lucky.
Daredevil.
Yeah. Yeah. He did what he wanted to do.
Yes, he did. And he was a good friend. He was a real good friend. Diane was the love of his life.
I really believe that.
I do too. He loved her with all his heart.
I think Jimmy was the love of Diane's life. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't ever put up with all of it. And then she never did get remarried or nothing. I mean, you know, this has been on her mind since that happened.
I know that she was the love of his life. He's told us. He loved her with all his heart. They just somehow
crashed sometimes, you know.
They were both headstrong.
When Jimmy passed away, Niecy just lost it. She was never the same. Never got over it. Never.
Never.
In what way?
Losing Jimmy.
It broke her heart.
Her son, it's her only son, and then the way he did, you know, and then nobody has been, you know,
held accountable
for it. Because I used to go visit Aunt Niecy when
she mourned herself to death.
Yes, I totally believe that.
You know, Jimmy was a hellraiser, and he did like to party, but Jimmy was also good. He had a good heart. He worked hard.
He knew everybody in Bonne Terre because he was always out and about.
And he was likable. Everybody liked him.
Yeah.
Your Uncle Bill said one time, everyone who met Jimmy Wade liked him, and if they didn't like him, they were either afraid of him or jealous of him. He was just, if you needed something, you could call him and he would be there. When Jimmy passed away, his funeral was so packed, they had to stand along the sides of the walls and in the back. And when we left to go to the funeral home, as we're pulling in that road there by Chuck and BJ's, they're still coming out of the funeral home in cars. That's how many people were there. That's when I'll start crying when I think about that, because that's what I was telling you. I can remember getting that phone call and Uncle Mike just breaking down and crying and driving to their house and Jimmy's mom sitting there just sobbing, big sobs, and she looked at Uncle Mike and said, I feel like someone's reached into my chest and pulled my heart out, and I don't think I'll ever recover. And I remember your Uncle Jimmy'd sit down, get up, sit down, and because he was lost. And your grandma, she just didn't know what to do. She was trying to console him, but she was heartbroken.
Too, yeah.
I remember Dana ironing Jimmy's shirt, writing a note, and putting the note in his pocket. And the twins with their tears coming down because they knew their daddy was gone, but they didn't know why. And I remember having to take Diane to the hospital because she was so distraught and so grief-stricken. I remember all that Jeannie. It took something out of Jeannie that day, and she's never got it back. Never. They were all just so heartbroken. His life just ended so violently.
Jimmy Wade was loved. He had a family, and they loved him, faults and all. He had friends, a lot of friends, and it seemed that they loved him too. To give you an idea of his friendships, I spoke with one of his close friends earlier this week, Richard.
He was a real good friend of mine. He's one of my best friends. Jimmy was the kind of guy you wanted to be around because he was, it never got boring when he was around. I mean, as far as partying, you wanted to party with Jimmy because his motto was there's nothing better than a good time. He was a great guy. Everybody liked Jimmy. I didn't know of any enemies that he had. Jimmy's, he didn't start anything, but he's a little guy. I think he was 150 pounds, probably 5'6". He was a little cocky, but a guy that size growing up around here in the 70s, you had to be a little cocky or you got walked on. He was a family guy. He had two lovely daughters, and he was something else. But as far as that happening to him, I wasn't around here, but I know that somebody knows something about that. When back in those days, if a fight broke out somewhere, there was always whoever was there was watching. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And somebody knows. I've heard bits and pieces of what happened, but but that's hearsay. You got to get people under oath and have them talk.
Sure.
As far as character-wise, I really can't think of anybody that would have anything bad to say about it. And I was close to a lot of his family. The Martins, and the Martins are hard people to beat. Well, like your grandfather.
Right.
He's just, he's a real good friend of mine, and it got to all them guys because they were all close to Jimmy.
Yeah, I think it took a pretty good toll on my family.
Yes, it did. If anybody's listening to this, hey, be a decent citizen. Tell what you know.
Absolutely.
It's been way too long, and justice needs to be served.
The Small Town Forgotten podcast is brought to you by Nuke's Hot Sauce. Nuke's Hot Sauce, an all-natural hot sauce company based out of Portland, Oregon. Spice up your meals with any of our 4 hot sauce flavors, ranging from mild, medium, to ultra-hot. Nuke's has got you covered. Try us out. www.nukessauces.com. Use code SMALLTOWN for 10% off your order. NEWKSSauces.com. Code SMALLTOWN.
Diane and Jimmy Wade were high school sweethearts. When she found out that she was pregnant in high school, they were in love. And like many young parents before them, they decided to get married.
He loved to have fun, and we did a lot with the girls, and he loved us all. He loved us all, and he was a hard worker. He gave me and the girls, anything and everything he could, and these two meant the world to him. And it's just so upsetting, that all this has happened, and it was just, to me, blown, swept underneath the rug. But Jim was a likable guy. A lot of people liked him. He had a lot of friends. And it's just sad that his life was taken, so young. Yep. It was something that I really never understand what really happened, that night. We were in high school, and we started, talking and this and that. And then next thing I knew, my brother also had a relationship with Jim's sister, so we ended up marrying brother and sister. But anyway, we just started like double dating, and I got pregnant. But anyway, me and Jim ended up having a small little, wedding, and anyway, I didn't know I was going to have twins until 2.5 days before I delivered them. And, we were young, and we were shocked, because I never thought about twins. And Jim was on course cloud 9, and we got, a few little apartment. Then we ended up renting a little house, and Jim was a hard worker, a great, provider, and so proud of them girls. Oh my God, of course, them being twins, they got attention everywhere we went.
What was it when you guys found out that you were having twins? That's a pretty big shocker 2 days before you're gonna have a baby. Yeah. What was that like?
Oh my goodness. It was just unbelievable, because I never thought about twins. I just remember going to the doctor and them always saying, "Man, you're really getting away," but I'm like, I can't help it. And so one day they said, maybe because back then there wasn't ultrasounds and that. So they're like, well, you better go get x-rays. So I did. And they go home, wait 2 hours, call me. So I did. And they're like, you're having twins. I go, what? They go, we're going to put you on bed rest. And then a few days later, they come out. And the weirdest thing is, of course, I had them normal, and I had a little bit of a rough time. And they're like, would you like to see the girls now? And I will them out, or they will me, past them. And I was about out of it. And I looked at them, and I was like, oh my gosh, one favors the Martins, one favors the Umfleets. Well, when I was getting ready to bring them home, they go, now do you know who's who? And I go, well, yeah, but maybe we better put the bracelets on for a few days.
Your relationship with Jimmy at the time that the incident happened, what was it like for you guys at that time?
Okay. We were separated. We were having issues with his drinking and that. But anyway, he had went to Kiwanis Center and trying to get help. And he begged me, don't go file for a divorce. Please don't. I don't know if you've seen the letters. He wrote the girl's letter, me letter when he was down there, and I knew that wasn't, he was sincere, But anyway, I'll never forget that Friday the 13th. I had to go to work from 10 to 6 that day. I was about ready to go out the door. I get a phone call, collect phone call from Jim. And he said, I don't know what it is, but I just got to tell you how much I love you. He goes, why don't you? And I said, I know. I said, I got to go. I'm on my way to work. Click. Phone rings again. Another phone call from him, because he was a union painter in St. Louis. And, back then they didn't have all the cell phones and all that. And he's like, I just got to tell you again how much I love you. He said, and don't ever forget it. Midnight hit. I got hateful. I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but I just want to go home. And they're like, well, Diane, what's the matter? I go, I don't know. I just felt like something bad happened. And then when they told me, I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to, tell my girls? I was like, and they were at the friends, and I just panicked. I just paced because I couldn't get a hold of Jim's family. Wee hour in the morning, I went to Jim's mom and dad's and asked him if what actually happened, and they didn't really know for sure either. And I said, Gian's want to be there at my mom's when I tell the girls. And so anyway, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. I could, I was like, I need my girls. So I called where they were staying at. And the dad didn't answer, and I said, Jerry, I hate to call this early, but I really need to talk to Pat. The girl's dad was killed tonight. The hardest thing ever was to tell them. They took it hard. I started trying to reach out, and nobody would want to talk to me. Because I was like, my husband just got killed, and nobody seems to want to talk to me. I couldn't do anything about it. That the states took it over and that they'll take it from there. And I was like, well, oh, okay. So that's what I remember. And I'm just so impressed with, my girls have done more than any law enforcement. I'm like, I always told them their dads, is definitely proud of them. And, he would be. Because, and I felt guilty, I'd say a few years back. Because I told Andrea, I said, Andrea, we might as well. Or, honey, I don't want to hurt you. Because, they dug and they did this and they did that. And I'm like, I come to the conclusion we're never going to get no help. Andrea tried getting a hold of cold case files and this, and always got shut down. And it's just a sad situation that I think they just overlooked and didn't really care about, and justice never come, and I don't know if it ever will. I thank God every day that the girls didn't give up.
Yep.
When I seen her, I was like, Andrea, I am just so impressed. Their dad would be smack down proud. Because a few times when I went to the graveyard, I'd say, Jim, just show us a sign. Just show the girls a sign. They're working hard on, trying to get justice for you. Oh, you don't know how many times I wanted to say something. But I was, my girls were 11. And they were young. And I was like, oh my God. Diane, just let it go. Because what if they come after your girls? You know, it's just sad. It's really sad. You know, that somebody's walking out there that got away with it.
Diane has not remarried since Jimmy Wade's death. She, more than anyone, knew what made Jimmy Wade wonderful and what made him a challenge to be with. But she loved him. Richard wasn't there the night that Jimmy Wade was killed. Neither were my grandma or my great-aunt Kathy, or even Jimmy Wade's wife, Diane. But Jimmy Wade wasn't alone. And if David Bryan White was not with him, chances are that Jimmy Wade was with someone he knew. Do you get a picture of Jimmy Wade now? I think I do. He was in fights, but he didn't start fights. He had a temper, but he had so much joy too. He did a lot for his friends, but he might have done things to upset them. He was a lot of fun, but he had a drinking problem. He was a ladies' man, but also a family man. He was a people pleaser, but was he a threat? Why would someone beat Jimmy Wade Martin to death? Next time on Small Town Forgotten. This is a special 2-part episode. In 2 days, we will release part 2 and speak to Jimmy Wade's 3 sisters.
Mom and Dad were never the same. Our family get-togethers were never the same. Dinner was never the same because Jimmy wasn't there. And but Mom, she never got over it. She actually took it to the grave with her. I think Mom grieved herself to death. She never got over losing Jimmy. And now Daddy, he hadn't smoked in 10 years. And he just picked up the cigarettes and started smoking again. But the day it happened, Daddy was out in the front yard, and Gary and I were there. My dad was walking around in circles. And like I said, some things you never forget, some things you can't remember, but there's some things that just stick with you. And I watched my dad walking around in the front yard, and Grandma was walking behind him. And he kept saying, "My God, Mom, they killed my boy. They killed my boy." He'd say that, and then he'd stop and he'd turn around and he'd say, "Mom, what am I going to do with Niecy?" Which that's what he called my mom. Mm-hmm. And, but Daddy, it was almost like he turned white-headed right before my eyes. And I know he didn't, but he kind of did. You know, so we were never the same. When something like that hits your family, even sisters, you know, I know the girls, Mom and Dad, how they grieved. We watched them. And I know the girls, you know, lived their life without their dad, and Diane without her husband. But I think when evil like that hits your family, it changes your whole way of thinking.
Small Town Forgotten is presented by Blueburn Productions, writer and executive producer Vanessa Martin, creative and executive producer Ashton Hulsey, director and executive producer Sean Lee Martin, and myself. Small Town Forgotten is produced in association with Vagrant Media Productions, Brett Wiley, Jake Delaloy, Caleb Cook. Podcast distribution and digital strategy by Logan Janis with Kerrigan Ventures. Original music written and performed by Todd Hulsey. For more information, please visit smalltownforgotten.com. Please like, follow, and subscribe on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Special thanks to the twins, Andrea and Angela, for their perseverance. I'm your host, Chris Hulsey. Thanks for listening to Small Town Forgotten.